Good morning. I'm excited to be here. We're on this third day of the Pan-African Digital Assembly, and I'm incredibly honored to be the session host for this fireside chat with Kamissa Camara, who is one of the most famous ministers on the face of the continent. And so it's a real blessing to have you here. She was Minister of Foreign Affairs in Mali, the youngest one and the first woman ever Minister of Foreign Affairs in Mali, and is currently the Minister for the digital economy and planning for Mali. And so she has a really interesting background. I hope we have an opportunity to talk about some of her background. But yeah, first, I just really want to welcome you, Honorable Minister, to this session.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
So before we go to some of the participant questions, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and it's hard not to talk about it. As the Minister for Digital Economy and for Planning, what are the things, what are the tools that you've used to fight this virus? And once, how do you see the future after the post-COVID future in Mali? Because your ministry is really forward-looking. You're almost a minister of the future of Mali, and I would love to really understand not only what you're doing now, but how you see post-COVID Mali, post-COVID-19 Mali.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So I've been in this position for about a year now. It's been exactly a year, actually. And what we have been doing in the ministry is really focus on young innovators, also known as startups, which you probably know very well. And that is because we believe that it's the youth that will build the future, because they are actually are the ones who are looking towards their future and what they want to see in the country for the next 10, 20 to 30 years. And so because we focused on them, because we have tried to work on a regulatory framework that will facilitate their work, it was very easy for us to call on them when the pandemic started. So before the first case was declared in Mali, we asked different startups, Malian startups, to come to us and to propose solutions to curb the effects of the pandemic if we were to see multiple cases in Mali, and which happened quite quickly. And we were pleasantly surprised by the number of solutions that were created. And some startups basically worked to further and develop the solutions that they already had. So we are currently working with probably, I would say, a dozen of them on different topics. Some of them are specialized in delivering food to different households. Some of them developed robots to sanitize places like the markets and hospitals, which is very useful in those very difficult times. And some of them developed, for example, I'm just giving you a few examples, buckets which are automatically censored. So you put your hands right under the faucet and water comes out. So these are solutions that were developed by Mali, which we put in a guide, which we call the digital guide of Mali, where we have all of the solutions from all over the country, all developed by startups. So this is one focus that the ministry has had since we started last year, and we will continue to support those startups because we believe that they are the ones who will build the future of this country.
Thank you very much for that. Let me bounce back on something you said about some of the startups that you've been working on on various COVID solutions. What I noticed is that you have an app that you were able to get on the Google and Apple stores, which has been very, very challenging for many innovators that have COVID and coronavirus solutions that have not been able to get them on those stores. Can you please give some practical advice as to how your ministry supported the startups in getting the solution on those stores?
So in Mali, we have a specialized agency that really is supposed to be working hand in hand with the government to develop solutions. And so we went to them very early on and we said, we have to go see the health ministry. We have to sit down with them and we have to figure out what they need in practical terms. And that was right before we had the first case in Mali. And we were convinced right at the time that once the first case would be declared, that the health ministry would not have time for us because they would be in urgency mode. So we went to see them and we said, look, this is what we can do for you. We imagined the solution in our heads first. It was all about being able to locate yourself through your app on the phone. It was about giving advice to people who could feel the symptoms of the COVID virus. We have different information about the virus itself. And most importantly, we wanted for the health services to be able to go towards the people who thought that they had the virus themselves so that they wouldn't be able to spread the virus around them. So these were the solutions that we had in our heads. And really the agency that I'm referring to is called AGETIC, 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 AGETIC. And they have developers, which they have in-house, who basically develop the solution within 48 hours. Very proud of that. Now we have over 20,000 people using the app every day. And I myself have it on my phone. As soon as we have an update on the number of cases, I have a pop-up on my phone that shows that through the app, which is called SOS Corona, which provides the information. So it's not that I don't have actual technical advice to provide, but I think you have to work hand in hand with your health ministry, first of all. Do not work in silo. I think it's a global effort that we're all making, and the health ministries in your countries are the leaders in this COVID crisis. I'm not sure how AGETIC was successful in having the app approved through the App Store or through Google, the Google Store, but I guess it worked. So it looked fine to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so after COVID, I mean, we're entrepreneurs. Most of the people that are listening are very forward-looking, very optimistic. We're going through incredible challenges right now, and we'll continue to have challenges, economic ones, not just health ones. What does the post-COVID world look like in your ministry in Mali?
So the crisis is quite a nerve-wracking one, I should say, because we see our normal equilibrium totally disturbed by the actual crisis. We cannot travel where we used to travel. We're not free of movement as we used to be. We're not allowed to gather as we used to. And I think it had, it triggered a lot of thinking, but original thinking about what the after COVID would look like. We are very much delighted with the fact that it is now that we can prove that the digital world is not just fancy and can be used by any normal citizen who has even a bit of a connection on his phone. So we believe that, we've always believed, I have to say, that the future is digital. The reason why in Mali we have planning as part of the digital economy portfolio is that we want to put the digital economy and digital developments at the heart of whatever we are going to develop for our country and whatever planning we are trying to do. And I think, as we say in French, ça tombe à pic. It's all about proving and showing that digital economy or anything that has to do with the digital can solve a lot of problems. So post-COVID will look like a world where digital is quite crucial, and I think our governments will pay more attention about developments in the digital arena. They're probably going to invest a lot more in this area, because what we're seeing also is that there are a lot of shortcomings in terms of funding and attention that we've been putting towards the digital, and it actually shows now. So it's a good opportunity for us, and I believe that the future, like you well put it, the digital is the future of our countries, and now is the time for us to prove it.
Thank you. Et ça tombe à pic parce que nous avons notre première question en français. Et donc, c'est une jeune femme, je ne sais pas dans quel pays elle est, mais elle dit elle est à la tête de 2 sociétés et elle met deux plateformes, une dans le secteur agricole, l'autre dans le digital health. Et le problème qu'elle rencontre dans son pays, malheureusement, elle n'a pas dit le pays dans lequel elle est, c'est sur le financement pour comment faire aboutir son projet. Surtout qu'elle est jeune, elle est femme. Quels sont les outils, quels sont les moyens donc pour avoir un soutien, pour faire aboutir ces projets? Je pense que c'est une question qui revient très souvent de nos jeunes gens qui ont toutes ces idées et parfois même des projets concrets, mais ne savent pas comment les faire financer pour arriver.
Alors d'abord, j'aimerais féliciter cette jeune femme pour son courage et pour son sens de l'entrepreneuriat. Donc malheureusement, elle n'a pas dit le pays dont elle venait, mais mon premier conseil, c'est d'abord de chercher les ressources à l'intérieur de son pays. En général, le gouvernement a des fonds de garantie du secteur privé qui sont mal connus et qui sont sous-utilisés. Donc, il serait peut-être intéressant pour elle d'aller vers le ministère de l'économie et des finances et voir si effectivement il y a un fonds de garantie du secteur privé auquel elle pourrait s'intéresser et voir dans quelle mesure il pourrait l'aider à obtenir des fonds ou des crédits dans le secteur bancaire. Pour avoir des fonds, en général, on se dit que les banques sont plutôt réticentes à financer des projets qui sont tout nouveaux, et qui sont issus de petites entreprises qui ne font que commencer. Effectivement, le risque est grand, mais il y a dans la plupart des pays francophones en tout cas, des fonds de garantie du secteur privé qui sont sous-utilisés. Et nous, je ne vous le cache pas, on en a fait la découverte ici au Mali dès que la crise a commencé. C'est un fonds de garantie qui est bien nanti et qui pourrait beaucoup servir à différentes entreprises, notamment des startups, pour obtenir des emprunts au niveau des banques. Donc, je pense que là, c'est un bon début. Ça pourrait être un bon début pour elle.
Merci beaucoup. The next question is, we're going back. C'est le franglais. The next question is in English, and I'm going to also ask you a related question to this, and maybe you can answer them together. And the question is that the pandemic has revealed that Africa needs to develop more industries, supply chains, and technologies to be less dependent on other continents. And the participant wants to know what your point of view is on this. And I want to tag one of the questions I had, which is about the AFCFTA, which is this gigantic initiative, free trade zone within Africa, which was supposed to start, but is being delayed, obviously, because of the issues. But so how can we be less dependent on other continents? How can we better collaborate within our own continent and build our complete supply chains within within our continent, complete technology solutions within the continent?
Thank you. Very complex questions. I'll try and answer as best as I can. First of all, I think the idea of building more supply chain industries within our own countries has been an issue for many years. I think we all do need to become as independent as possible, but the world has changed quite a bit. And you will see that I don't know of any country, not even the United States, who can say that they are totally independent and they don't depend on another country for that or that resource. So it's also a good thing to think about how globalization has changed the way we behave in our industries, in the way we conduct business. So it's really hard to say that you could be totally independent from other countries and that you could be self-sufficient. Even though we can work towards that, especially I'm thinking about agribusiness. I think in most of our African countries, this sector, which is quite important, I would say even vital to our survival, should be prioritized and developed. But globalization has created a way in which we cannot live without one another in terms of countries. Now, about free trade within the continent, I think there is a will. There is a political will to make that a reality. When I was foreign minister, we had many discussions within the African Union about how we could make this a reality, how countries could work together to harmonize their laws and to make sure that there is a free trade amongst ourselves. But you have also to remember that even within regional communities, such as the ECOWAS or the SADC, there have been some hurdles and some obstacles with free trade because of the language barriers, because of currency differences. So I think it's a long-term goal, and we have to look at it as a long-term goal. It's not going to happen du jour au lendemain, but we really have to take a very hard look at that. But again, what my main point was that we live in a new world. It's globalization, and the pandemic has really shown us that most of us will go through an economic crisis because we depend on each other. And if we cannot communicate, if we cannot trade within our continents, and it's going to be very, very hard for us. I'm not sure if I made myself clear, but that's my personal take on this.
No, I mean, that was a lot more than we get from many politicians, which brings me to my own question. This isn't from the participants. You actually come from a civil society background. You challenged your president when he wanted to change the constitution to add terms. You then became an advisor and then a minister. How This is very interesting because, you know, in many countries, you're either in civil society or you're in government. It's that transition is very rare. How do you make that transition without feeling like maybe you've betrayed your cause?
Excellent question. So the disclaimer here is that when I worked with civil society, and most of the civil society groups that I've worked with, either in West Africa or Central Africa, will tell you that every time I would go in countries to see them, to work with them, to fund them, to monitor their activities, I would tell them that I wanted them to meet with their different ministries and to meet with the governments, because I've always thought that the work of civil society goes complementary with the work of the government. You cannot dissociate one with the other. And civil society and government should not see each other as adversaries. One has to advise the other, one has to counterbalance the power of the other, and one also has to monitor what the other is doing so that the other thinks about, sometimes when it forgets, thinks about the well-being of its own people. So I've never thought that one goes against the other. So I don't feel that I've betrayed anything. I think that I have the civil society background, civil society understanding. And now that I'm a government minister, I still work with civil society. They do come to visit me. They do come to my office. They do share some concern. And as a member of the government, I have a lot more leverage that I used to have. And I feel like I have a lot more impact that I used to have. So I think the transition was quite natural. And I'm feeling very okay and very comfortable with it.
So we're here today thanks to I4Policy, which is a digital policy consortium, a group of organizations that have come together to have a common voice on policy and enable more fluid discussions on policy between civil society, digital civil society, and policymakers such as yourself. Tell us about the policies. You talked about guidedigital.ml, which is kind of, it's I guess a listing of all the programs that you have, as well as the startups that you're supporting. But tell us more about policy, the Mali Startup Act. Tell us more about how the civil society and that background that you had have helped influence policy in the digital economy portion of your ministry. How are you working with the digital civil society world in developing policies for Mali to support the digital economy?
Okay, so those startups that we support work with what we call incubators. And incubators, although they are entrepreneurs, I believe that they are part of civil society. They have a mission which is to serve the economy, which is to train young entrepreneurs, which is to work with them towards building a business plan. They are part of civil society. And what we have been doing is that we have been including them in most of our activities, especially when we prepared the Startup Act, and now we're preparing, I don't want to bore you with technical terms, what we call it in French, décret d'application. So once you pass a law through Parliament, you have to then pass a decree that will explain how you intend to apply the law. So we have been including them in all of our activities. Also, in our office, we've welcomed many youth civil society groups who have been interested in the digital world, but most of the time they've also been interested in the way that we would work towards sort of regulating some of the violence that we're seeing on social media. You might know that Mali has been facing quite a number of challenges over the past few years, and we've seen on social media, but also on WhatsApp, some videos that were quite violent, and we've seen, unfortunately, people inciting people to violence, and they've been very concerned about that, and they wanted to know how the ministry could work with them to monitor that and sensitize the youth. Most of the time, it was the young people that they wanted to target to curb those effects. So it's been quite challenging to work on those issues, but it's one way to show you how we worked with civil society, and based on that, we have worked, and it takes time, I have to say, with draft policy that will regulate how social media is used without infringing on freedom of speech, because I know that will be your next question, but also on making sure that incubators, which I've mentioned earlier, have a clear role to play in the way startups conduct business. So we have multiple drafts, laws and decrees in the parliament, and because we have a new parliament that just started less than a week ago, it's the perfect time for us to go and with civil society groups to raise their awareness of some of those issues and let them know that these are important pieces of law that we want passed quite soon.
So this is definitely an opportunity for me to plug Afrolabs. So one of my many hats, and the one that I'm using today, is as board chair of Afrolabs, which is an organization that brings together the incubators that you were talking about, but all innovation centers, tech hubs across the African continent. We started in 2011. We had 5 hubs that started this organization. Today, we have over 200 hubs that are members, 209 to be exact, in 46 countries, supporting a community of over 1 million African entrepreneurs. And I think really that as you rightly said, these hubs, these incubators, these innovation centers are so key in building the bridge between the entrepreneurs and policy makers, as well as giving them the required support to take their idea and transform it into a viable, money-making, profitable business. I think that's the role of these hubs. Many of them, most of them are free to entrepreneurs. And so I'm seeing a lot of questions about how can I get support? Really look to see where you have one of those incubators, tech hubs in your country. Go to them and make use of those resources, even though these days it's probably going to be online. So we have some more questions. On reste en anglais. It looks like, j'ai une question en français ici. Que prévoyez-vous en tant que responsable? Ben voilà, encore, c'est la réponse qu'on avait, mais peut-être que cette fois, on va la poser, on va répondre en français. Que prévoyez-vous en tant que responsable africain pour tous ces jeunes qui ont trouvé des solutions innovantes numériques contre le Covid-19? Je pense que pas seulement contre le Covid-19, mais en général. Je pense que vous avez répondu un tout petit peu à cette question tout à l'heure en parlant du rôle justement des incubateurs, des hubs au Mali, mais peut-être que vous pouvez donner un peu plus d'explications.
Oui, effectivement. Donc, une initiative du département de l'économie numérique au Mali c'était d'organiser tous les derniers vendredis du mois des compétitions entre startups et on appelait l'événement Tech Fridays. Donc, c'était tous les derniers vendredis du mois. Les startups qui étaient intéressés à venir présenter leurs projets passaient par les incubateurs et les incubateurs se chargeaient de sélectionner les meilleurs projets pour qu'ils puissent venir compétir. Et donc, à travers les différentes compétitions, donc je peux dire par vendredi, par événement, on avait environ 15 startups qui venaient présenter leur projet. Ça, c'était l'objectif principal de l'événement, c'était pas qu'il y ait un gagnant, un deuxième ou un troisième. Évidemment, ça faisait partie de la compétition, ça fait partie de toutes les compétitions. Mais c'était un moyen pour nous original de donner une plateforme à ces différentes startups parce que lors des événements, il y avait différentes ambassades qui étaient présentes, on les invitait toutes. Il y avait des investisseurs qui étaient cachés au fond de la salle, moi je les connaissais, certains membres de mon équipe les connaissaient aussi, et les approchaient discrètement en leur disant, voilà, j'ai de l'argent pour vous, mais j'aimerais que vous développiez votre solution un peu plus. Donc, on a réussi à travers cette initiative à donner une plateforme à ces jeunes innovateurs afin qu'ils puissent développer leurs activités un peu plus au-delà de ce que les incubateurs leur proposaient. Donc, ça, c'est un moyen qu'on a trouvé au sein du département. Je sais que certains de mes collègues au Burkina Faso, même en RDC ou au Congo-Brazzaville avaient d'autres idées plutôt originales également de soutenir les startups. Mais je suis convaincue, ça c'est vraiment une conviction personnelle, que ce sont ces startups qui vont développer les solutions qui feront le futur de votre pays. Autre exemple, nous avons aussi organisé, c'était au mois de février, un hackathon. Donc, on a sélectionné 15 développeurs. On les a mis dans une villa pendant 48 heures. On leur a demandé de développer des solutions pour le futur. Et bien sûr, lorsque vous avez toute cette intelligence, cette créativité ensemble pendant 48 heures, les résultats sont phénoménaux. Mais le défi, en plus de ça, c'est de continuer à développer les solutions qu'ils vous ont présentées et de ne pas les laisser dans les oubliettes. Mais je pense qu'une fois que vous les mettez en relation avec des investisseurs, vous pouvez faire un certain suivi, mais ça dépend aussi de l'organisation et de son envie de réussir. Donc voilà, je pense qu'en tant que responsable, en tant que ministre, l'essentiel pour moi, c'est de donner tous les outils qu'il faut à ces différents innovateurs et après à eux de voir comment ils veulent les exploiter.
Nous savons que votre temps, il est vraiment précieux. I have one more question before going to a final question from the audience. There is a difference in the speed at which the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem has grown in Anglophone countries and Francophone countries. What do you attribute that to, and what measures can we concretely take to bridge that gap, which is on the same continent?
This is a very hard question because what I will say is maybe not even based on reality, but because I've spent quite a bit of time in the United States, I have always felt that English-speaking countries have this way of thinking that is totally different from the Francophone countries. And I think, your language conditions the way you think. And somehow the English-speaking countries in Africa have always been in advance, I would say, they've always been in advance, and the Francophone countries have had more challenges or have been a little slow in getting up to speed. So to what do I attribute that? I don't know exactly where it comes from. It has to come from somewhere, but I would think that language and the connections that those English countries have probably have a lot to do with it. The way a country like Rwanda can connect to entrepreneurs in the United States or in England or in Zimbabwe is not the way Malian entrepreneurs can connect to those same ones who are leaders in the field. So I think that has to do with it. And how do you curb this gap between the two? I think that now that we have all those tools and that we can connect online like this, you're in Douala, I believe, and I4 policy in Kigali, I'm in Bamako. I think this will be one way for us to bridge this gap and exchange best practices. But I think language barrier is a big impediment to that.
Thank you for answering that. I know your time is valuable. We only have a couple more questions. Corruption. How can we use digital tools, not just during COVID and all these big budgets that are occurring, but for new ways of transparency for effective government policies? How can the digital world support anti-corruption policy?
I think the digital world has supported anti-corruption work for a number of years. And I think our role as policymakers, as politicians, etc., is to convince our colleagues that those tools are good for our countries. Those tools exist. I will give you an example. AGETIC, which I mentioned earlier, which is the agency which develops digital solutions for the government here in Mali, developed a platform which helps transparency in procurement processes. In French, we call it passation de marché, in English, procurement. And so this platform that they have helps, for example, any small business to compete for a call for applications or call for offers. We call it an appel à marché ou appel à une offre de marché, quelque chose comme ça. And so when small businesses or big businesses all compete for the same thing, the actual platform selects the one that has the best offer. So it's not that the ones who have been longer in the market or the ones that have more connections will win the procurement. It's probably the small ones also have a fair chance of competing. And this application is available. It's always been there. Some of our agencies in the Ministry of Finance uses it, but we would love for, to export the solution to other countries. So I will say that those solutions already exist. It's now a matter for our different governments to see the importance of them and to adopt them in their processes.
This actually will tie right into the last question, well, the last question from the participants, which is about how do you work with other countries? You mentioned that you would love this solution to be exported. Is there some kind of coordination right now amongst the ministers that work on digital economy matters? And as part of that group or as part of the coordination between them, do you have any ambition to have some of the servers, the data stored on the African soil, right? The example given from the person in the question, sending an email from Boya, which is here in Cameroon, actually to Bamako or even to Douala, go through the US. So is this something that ministers are trying to work on to bring the data home?
It's a question of what we call digital sovereignty, souveraineté digitale. I think it's quite important in the dialogue about digital economy, about planning for the future. We have data centers here in Mali, which are housed with one of the agencies which is attached to our ministry. It's called SMTD, Société Malienne de Transmission et de Diffusion. They do have data centers which we are planning on using to house our data. I think, again, the question of data is a question of sovereignty. It is as important as la délimitation des frontières, as important as borders. It's something that we have been working on, and some of our data are actually housed there. And I agree with whoever asked the question that you cannot talk about digital economy or having control of your digital information if you don't have control of your own data. So in Mali, we do have the infrastructure. It costs quite a lot of money, but we know that this is investing in the future.
Madam Minister, I know that we're running out of time. Actually, that we're out of time. But one last question, if you may. So many people have been inspired by you, not just young women, but young men as well across the continent. What is the one piece of advice that you would share with this community of young people?
Thank you for the question. What comes to mind is never be afraid. Never be afraid of anything, of what you can do, of your potential. Your dreams can all be true. It's not about, well, this is too big, or this is something that I cannot do. If you put your mind to it, if you can visualize it in your head, it's possible. And don't be afraid. That's one thing that I will share. I have been afraid in the past. This is personal, and I want to share it with you. But you can do so much, and you can live so many lives in your own life that fear is something that you have to completely ban from your vocabulary. You have to meditate to kick it out of your life, and you will see that you will be able to achieve your full potential.
Wow, Madame Minister, Madame la Ministre, merci pour le temps que vous nous avez donné aujourd'hui. Merci pour l'inspiration que vous nous donnez. Merci pour le soutien pour les startups et la communauté numérique qui nous a rejoints aujourd'hui. Merci. Et j'espère que vous resterez pour le reste du programme sur l'Assemblée panafricaine numérique qui est en cours, sponsorisée et organisée par iProPolicy. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci à vous.